Alright guys, hope everybody was able to get caught up on all of the older videos while I took my break. Appreciate you guys waiting and allowing me to get a break in. I definitely needed it. When you spend 12-13 hours a day just doing nothing but videos, editing, answering emails, going through comments, and all the different things you got to do, at some point you just got to stop for a minute, get away from it all, and get you a break in. Yeah, you know what I mean. Alright guys, let's go ahead and pick it up. This is part 7, and we're in Daniel chapter 7, and we're going to start with verse 8. And it says here that I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So you have Daniel here considering the 10 kingdoms that arose and broke up Western Rome. And while he's considering those 10 kingdoms, or those 10 horns, another little horn arises. Now let's take a look at this word little. First of all, we'll just hover over it and see what we get here. And it says, corresponding to Hebrew 2191, it means little. The word here is zayar, and we need to go back and look at the Hebrew. So I brought it up down here, and we'll just bring this up. And it says here it's corresponding to the original Hebrew language of Hebrew 2191. So we hover over that, and we see here that it says from an unused root akin by permutation to Hebrew 6819, meaning to dwindle, small, little. Okay, this still is not telling us what it is, so we're right clicking on that number. We're going to look that one up, and we come to Hebrew 2191, and it says from an unused root akin by permutation to this one, meaning to dwindle, small, little. So now we hover over this one and we get to the root of it all, and it says a primitive root to be small. That is figuratively ignoble, be brought low, little one, be small. So we find out that this word little means ignoble, and ignoble is what we need to go ahead and take a look at and find out what exactly is ignoble, because this little horn is very, very important to us. So we're over here on Merriam-Webster dictionary, and we look up the word ignoble. It's an adjective, and it means characterized by baseness or loudness or meanness, of low birth or common origin. That is to be a plebeian. So let's click on that and let's take a look at what the plebeian is. So a plebeian is a noun, and it is a member of the Roman plebs, one of the common people. Okay, so we go over here to the plebs, and let's find out what are the Roman plebs, because it's the Roman Empire that we're dealing with. So we got plebs, it's a noun, and it is the general populace, the common people of ancient Rome. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with, ancient Rome. We're dealing with the Roman Empire. And so this ignoble little horn, this ignoble horn, is a common person of ancient Rome. A common person of ancient Rome. Okay, so what we're doing is we're coming over here to Wikipedia, and we're going to go over Justinian I. Now remember, prior to Justinian and prior to everything else, we had the major earthquake, the great earthquake of the book of Revelation, the first great earthquake of the book of Revelation. So the Roman Empire was infiltrated by these 10 kingdoms that come in and constantly besiege Rome until eventually Western Rome falls. But in that process, you have a guy named Constantine who brought about a church and state coming together. Now, he didn't fully establish that, but he brought in the Council of Nicaea, which is important because that's the beginning of the papacy, but the papacy does not get established until Justinian. But you have the coming together, the end of the pagan Roman system, the huge, massive political earthquake where we go from pagan Rome into all of a sudden we are shifting in the time of Constantine from a pagan Rome to a Christian Rome, a Christian Roman Empire. Very important that you understand that we are in a shifting process in the time of Constantine. We are in the time of the earthquake. So we're going from pagan going from the pagan Roman Empire, which is the empire of the times of when Christ was walking the earth and the apostles were on the earth and the first martyrs were on the earth. And then we are going through the shaking of the political system of the pagan Roman system. In the time of Constantine, there's a shaking and you have a shifting toward a Christian Roman Empire. And then, of course, as you go from Constantine down through the different emperors from Constantine, you have the different tremors and stuff, that the aftershocks of the quake going on, and we eventually come up to this Justinian guy. Now, his dates go from 482 to 565 AD. So this is just shortly after the 476 incident where you have the 10 kingdoms arise and are starting to besiege Rome, but really the Western Empire. And then all of a sudden you got this Justinian guy coming into position. Now remember that at this point, basically your emperors are also becoming bishops of Rome, kind of say, but not fully yet, but you have them basically taking on different positions. So this is Justinian I, also known as Justinian the Great, and also known as Saint Justinian the Great. So you have Justinian the Great, the political side, and then Saint Justinian the Great, the ecclesiastical or religious side of this Christian Roman Empire that had started to be established under Constantine during the Great Earthquake, where the political system had a dramatic shift. The stars from heaven fell, the heavens were rolled up like a scroll. The government was completely and utterly changed at that point in time. But it's important to understand that this is 482, that this is after the rise of the 10 kings. So let's go back to the book of Daniel real quickly and take a look at something. Okay, back over here on Daniel chapter 7, we want to just quickly go down to verse 24 where we have a little bit of explanation going on. So here's 24. And it tells us that, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings, or kingdoms. Remember, kings and kingdoms are synonymous in symbolism, in a symbolism prophecy. Not a literal prophecy. There's two different types of prophecies. There's literal, and then there's symbolic prophecy. This is a symbolic prophecy. And 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them. Okay, so you have another king, or kingdom, or little horn or ignoble horn that is rising up, but it's rising up after the 10 kings. So after Western Rome has fallen, so you had Constantine come into position, the great earthquake, the great shaking, the complete political change, the complete governmental change from paganism to Christian Roman Empire. And right after he comes into power, just shortly after he comes into power, all of a sudden you have these 10 kingdoms, these 10 kings, these kingdoms coming down and besieging the Western Roman Empire, and by 476 the entire Western Roman Empire has been pretty much taken over completely by these 10 kingdoms. Then after they exist over there in the Eastern Roman Empire, in the New Rome as it's called, over there with this capital Constantinople, you have Justinian coming into existence, and this is after the 10 kings or 10 kingdoms that came in and basically brought down the Western Roman Empire. So again, it's after the 476. It's after the 10 kingdoms. So now let's go down here and let's also realize that because of this restoration activities, Justinian was trying to restore the Roman Empire back to its original glory, back to having the West and the East one huge, massive Roman Empire all over again, but this time would be the Christian Roman Empire that encompasses the entirety of the Mediterranean Sea. But because of his restoration activities, Justinian has sometimes been known as the last Roman in mid-20th century historiography. And we can go, this ambition was expressed by the partial recovery of the territories of the defunct Western Roman Empire. Remember, the Western Roman Empire had just been conquered by the various different kingdoms, the 10 kings that arose and brought down the western part of the empire. The whole point here is to show you that he's trying to restore back or to bring back this this Roman Empire that once existed, which was a pagan Roman Empire at the time, but now he wants to bring it back together as the new Christian Roman Empire, one big glorious empire once again. And if we remember from the book of Daniel chapter 2 prophecy, that we have this mixing of iron and clay. We have the iron trying to put itself back together, but the clay coming in and it won't stay together. It's destroyed. Then it tries to come back together, then it's destroyed. It can't hold itself together. Okay, we have that mixing of the iron and the clay. So we have the papacy coming into existence, but we have the 10 kingdoms coming in, and we have the people. The people keep messing up this iron clay. Every time it gets its act together and starts to become an empire again, something huge happens. So as pagan Rome falls, Christian Rome comes into power. When Christian Rome falls, Holy Roman Empire comes into power. And they keep trying to put themselves together, and then they keep being destroyed by judgments from the Father up above. And it's all being done through the people, the clay. But let's go on and let's see why we're here on Justinian I, why we brought him up, and we'll just go down here to his life, and this is his life. Justinian was born in Taurisium. Forgive me if I can't say the words right, guys. Dardania. Just get the information. That's what's important. Around 482. So just shortly after the 10 kings have come in, the 10 kingdoms have brought down the Roman Empire. A native speaker of Latin. Okay, very important. This Latin. Latin. Very, very important. You'll find out in the book of Revelation. Possibly the last Roman emperor to be one. That is a native speaker of Latin. But it goes on to say that he came from a peasant family believed to have been of Illyrio Roman. Okay? That doesn't matter, the Illyrio Roman and however I said it, but here's what matters. He came from a peasant family. When we look up the word peasant, it tells us that a peasant is a pre-industrial agricultural laborer or farmer with limited land ownership, especially one living in the Middle Ages under feudalism and paying rent, tax, fees, or services to a landlord. In Europe, and remember, Europe is where we're focused. This is where the 10 kings come from. Europe is the focus. He's told us twice now to focus in Europe. And he tells us 3 more times in the book of Revelation that we're focused in Europe. But it tells us that in Europe, 3 classes of peasants existed: slave, serf, and free tenant. So this is an ignoble individual, this Justinian is. Now let's continue to read what it says here. So, believed to have been of Iro-Roman or Thraco-Roman origins. The cognomen Justinianus, which he took later, is indicative adoption by his uncle Justin. So, this ignoble individual becomes adopted by Justin. Now, Justin is a very important player in the Roman Empire. During his reign, he founded Justinia Prima, not far from his birthplace. His mother was Vigilantia, the sister of Justin. Okay, sister of Justin. Justin, who was in the imperial guard, the excubators, before he became emperor. So Justin, who is his mother? His mother was the sister of Justin, who becomes the emperor, and Justin adopted Justinian as his own. So this Justinian goes from an ignoble individual to that of a adopted son of an emperor of Rome. So this ignoble horn begins to rise up by the adoption through an individual who later becomes an emperor of Rome. So he became emperor, adopted Justinian, that is, Justin adopted Justinian, brought him to Constantinople. So he brings him to the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire and ensured the boy's education. Now, as a result, Justinian was well educated in jurisprudence, theology, and Roman history. Now remember, we just went through the earthquake. we just had the demolishing of the Western Empire, part of the empire. We have a new Christian Roman Empire in development. It's coming into fruition. Constantine the Great being the first emperor and bishop of Rome, basically together, basically bringing church and state together, but not fully established at that point, but bringing it together, and you got the tremors continuing to shake throughout the empire as all of this is coming into fruition. And you have Justinian being educated in jurisprudence, that is the law, as well as theology, that is religion, as well as the Roman history, which is political. So you have political, law, and religion all being educated into Justinian during a time in which the Roman Empire is becoming a Christian Roman Empire. And so we have an individual who is prepared to bring about a complete, solid church and state empire. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of it, but again, the link was always in the description below the video. There's a couple things I want to go over here. First of all, let's talk about his reign here and the legislative activities. We're going to read pretty much all of this. Justinian achieved lasting fame through his judicial reforms, particularly through the complete revision of all Roman law. So Justinian eventually comes into a place of power. He becomes the emperor, as we'll see here shortly. But what he does is he makes a complete revision of all Roman law, something that had not previously been attempted. The total of Justinian's legislation is known today as the Corpus Juris Civilis. So if you want to look into this, and people that study law oftentimes do end up looking into this because it has to do with the jurisprudence of law. And speaking of that, let's just go back up here. I want you to see what jurisprudence actually is here. So we hover over jurisprudence, and it tells us, let's go up a little bit here. Jurisprudence is the theoretical study of law. Scholars of jurisprudence seek to explain the nature of law in its most general form and provide a deeper understanding of legal reasoning, legal systems, legal institutions, and the role of law in society. So it is the in-depth study of law and how it came to be, why it is, and how it functions. All right, so let's go back down here now. And this Corpus Juris Civilis, let's just see what it says here, is the modern name for a collection of fundamental works in jurisprudence issued from 529 to 534 by order of Justinian I, Eastern Roman Emperor. It is also sometimes referred to as the Code of Justinian, and then it goes on to talk about other stuff. You can click on the link and go investigate the entirety of it. It consists of the Codex Justinianus, which also called Codex Justiniani, is one part of the Corpus Juris Civilis, the codification of Roman law ordered early in the 6th century AD by Justinian I, who was an Eastern Roman, that is the Byzantine Empire. He was the Roman emperor of the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople. Also the Digesta of Pandecte. The digest, also known as Pandex, is a name given to the compendium or digest of juristic writings on Roman law compiled by order of the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian I. Also the Institutionis, the Institutes of Justinian is a unit of Corpus Juris Civilis, the 6th century codification of Roman law ordered by Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. It is largely based upon the Institutes of Gaius, a Roman jurist of the 2nd century, and then you have the Novale. The Novale Constitution, or the Justinian's novels, are now considered one of the four major units of Roman law initiated by Roman Emperor Justinian I in the course of his long reign. The other three pieces are, and we just went over those. So early in his reign, Justinian appointed Questor Tribonian to oversee this task. The first draft of the Codex Justinianus, a codification of imperial constitutions from the 2nd century onward, was issued on April 529. The final version appeared in 534. It was followed by the Digesta, a compilation of older legal texts, in 533, and by the Institutiones, a textbook explaining the principles of law, the Novelle, a collection of new laws issued during Justinian's reign, supplements of corpus. As opposed to the rest of the corpus, the Novelle appeared in Greek, the common language of the Eastern Empire. So you have a shift from the Latin language, which is important, to the Greek language, which is what we find the New Testament wrote in, is into the Greek language. Okay? But this Latin language continues, and it continues with one particular people. And it's very important. And I may or may not bring it up in this video, but when we get into the book of Revelation, it has to be brought up. There's no choice in the matter. But this corpus forms the basis of Latin jurisprudence, including what? Ecclesiastical canon law. What is ecclesiastical canon law? The law of the papacy. The law of the apostate church, the church that comes in the place of Christ. That's ecclesiastical law or canon law. It belongs to the papacy. That's what Justinian did in the revision of the Codex. And for historians provides a valuable insight into the concerns and activities of the later Roman Empire. As a collection, it gathers together the many sources in which the leges, or the laws, and the other rules were expressed or published. Proper laws, senatorial consults, imperial decrees, case law, and jurists' opinions and interpretations. Tribonian's code ensured the survival of Roman law. That Roman law still exists to this day in that ecclesiastical canon law. It formed the basis of later Byzantine law as expressed in the Basilica of Basil, Basil I and Leo VI, the Wise. The only Western province where the Justinian Code was introduced was Italy. Italy. More specifically, Rome. Rome, the Seven Hills. From where it was passed to Western Europe, okay, here we are Europe again, Europe, in the 12th century and became the basis of much of European law code. Okay, so where do we get a lot of the code that goes into the Western Europe? Right here from Justinian. It eventually passed to Eastern Europe, where it appeared in Slavic editions, and it also passed on to Russia. It remains influential to this day. So Western Europe, Eastern Europe, that's all of Europe, and then also all the way into Russia. He passed laws to protect prostitutes and exploitation of women from being forced into prostitution. Rapists were treated severely. Further, by his policies, women charged with major crimes should be guarded by other women to prevent sexual abuse. If a woman was widowed, her dowry should be returned, and a husband could not take on a major debt without his wife giving her consent twice. So just some of the things that were changed. If you rape somebody, you face severe penalties. We're seeing that with things like Weinstein today, right? We're seeing the exact same thing taking place through the Trump administration. And I'm not saying that Trump is tied into this. I'm saying that right there, that specific thing is a very good thing. It's not a bad thing in any way, form, or fashion. That is actually beneficial. Okay, and if something is beneficial, it should be done everywhere, irregardless of whether it's part of a beast system or not part of a beast system. If you're a victim of a rape, then you should see justice for that individual that did the rape. Period and point blank. There is nothing that is not tied to the quote-unquote beast in any way, form, or fashion. That is just justice. That's what that is. And so he did bring in certain things of justice. The problem is that as he did these codexes and this ecclesiastical canon law, that it became the persecution of the church, because it basically, if you didn't follow the new ways of the Christian Roman Empire, you were persecuted, murdered, drowned, put on fire, all sorts of different types of punishments and things that were done to you. Again, you're dealing with the law of man rather than the law of God, which we've been over throughout the different videos, that God does not operate through man's laws. God operates through the laws of life, creation first and foremost, life, and all these kinds of things. As we've seen with, we brought up Cain, for example. Cain, if we were dealing with man's laws, he would have been executed. God said, no, go your way, I'll put a mark on you, and if anybody touches them, I will take vengeance on that person 7 times, and so forth and so on. Why? Well, because there is an agenda that God has, and he's working out an ordeal, as we're seeing through the book of Daniel and later in the book of Revelation, that what started with Nimrod will eventually unfold all the way to its max, and then once it gets to its max, then it will be reverted back to its original until we get back to prior to Nimrod again. And then at that point, you have all of the nations of the world under the kingdom of Israel, and Israel is over all the earth. Okay, that's the ultimate game plan here. That's the ultimate strategy. That's ultimately where God is going with all of these things. And so the entire earth will be given to Abraham and to Abraham's seed through the Messiah. The true, genuine promise to Abraham was that of the entirety of the earth, as we'll also see when we look at the temple symbology. Then we got the Nika riots. We'll just mention a little bit here. Justinian's habit of choosing efficient but unpopular advisors nearly cost him his throne early in his reign. In January 532, partisans of the chariot racing factions in Constantinople, normally rivals, united against Justinian in a revolt that has become known as the Nika riots. So this chariot racing, that is today, modern times, is NASCAR, or horsepower racing. It's just basically where you have a track and you run the horses around and see who wins. No different than NASCAR today. NASCAR, what do we have? NASCAR runs around the track with their horsepower, their motors, to see who wins the race. But these Nika riots is how basically Constantinople and the area got burnt with fire. I mean, we hover over this. It says the Nika riots, and you can click on it and go to the link and read all about it. The Nika revolt, or Nika sedition, took place against Emperor Justinian I in Constantinople over the course of a week in 532 current era. They were the most violent riots in the city's history, with nearly half of Constantinople being burned or destroyed, and tens of thousands of people, and so forth and so on. And this is where your books got destroyed. This is where all that stuff got absolutely destroyed. Let's go right here to the military activities. And I just want to catch right here, as a Christian Roman emperor, Justinian considered it his divine duty to restore the Roman Empire. Now, remember, this is the Roman Empire. It covered the entirety of the Mediterranean Sea, and then all of a sudden you have the 10 kings or 10 kingdoms come in. It ends up taking over the Western Empire, and all that is left is the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, and Constantinople being New Rome. But Justinian saw this as his Christian divine duty. Remember, he sits in the position of not really the Pope yet, because the popes don't exist yet. He's the last Roman, as it's called. Remember, Justinian's the last Roman. And that's when, because the papacy basically takes over from Justinian onwards. But so he comes into position, and he wants to take and bring this empire back to this map that you're seeing here. But right now, because of the 10 kings, and he's arising after the 10 kings, he sees it as his divine duty to bring about this kingdom once again. So we'll go down here and we'll look at this right here, which is the War of Sassanid Empire, 527 to 532. And we'll just read right here. It says, having thus secured his eastern frontier, Justinian turned his attention to the west, where what? Germanic kingdoms, right? That's those 10 kingdoms that came down, had been established in the territories of the former Western Roman Empire. So now he's turning back. He's got the east secured, and he's looking over here at the west, and this is divine duty by God Almighty to go in and to conquer and to reestablish, to bring back the Roman Empire now as a Christian Roman Empire. So the clay came in and destroyed the pagan Roman Empire. Now Justinian, the iron, is going to try to cleave itself back together, back into the Roman Empire, this time as the Christian Roman Empire. So he begins the conquest here, and it says that the first of the western kingdoms Justinian attacked was of the Vandals in North Africa. King Hilderic, who had maintained good relations with Justinian and the North African Catholic clergy, had been overthrown by his cousin Gelimer in 530 A.D., imprisoned. The deposed king appealed to Justinian. In 533, Belisarius sailed to Africa. Now let's go back up here. Belisarius, I did not bring this up, and that's my error there. Belisarius is Justinian's general. His general Belisarius swiftly conquered the Vandal kingdom of North Africa. So Belisarius is his general, is Justinian's general that does his attacking, along with another one that will come up later. So in 533, Belisarius sailed to Africa with a fleet of 92 dromons, escorting 500 transports carrying an army of about 15,000 men, as well as a number of barbarian troops. So he does have Justinian, of course, through Belisarius, does use these Germanic tribes, these barbarians, against other barbarians. You know, we have the 10 tribes working against the 10 tribes, literally. But number of barbarian troops. They landed at Kaput Vada, modern Ras Cambia in modern Tunisia. They defeated the Vandals, who were caught completely off guard, ad decimum, on September 14th, 533. And Trichamarum in December. Belisarius took Carthage. King Gelimer fled to Mount Papua in Numidia, but surrendered the next spring. He was taken to Constantinople, where he was paraded in a triumph. Sardinia and Corsica, the Balearic Islands, and the stronghold Septum Frates near Gibraltar were recovered in the exact same campaign. Then we read down here that an African prefecture centered in Carthage was established in April 534. So basically it's overtaken by 534. But there's something I want you to see. First of all, it says things like, in this war, the contemporary Procopius remarks that Africa was so entirely dispeopled that a person might travel several days without meeting a human being. And he adds, it's no exaggeration to say that in the course of the war, 5 million perished by the sword and famine and pestilence. Okay, and so we see the various Book of Revelation concepts coming to pass right here during this battle, but this is just one of the many things that take place. But by 534 it's overtaken, and when you read this it sounds like, well, the Vandals were utterly annihilated, just ceased to exist. But that's not true, because the 10, you got to remember that when you get into the Book of Revelations, the 10 kings first and foremost do what? They give their power over to the beast. Then later, the same 10 are still in existence, and they bring down the beast. They show her nakedness and all this other kind of thing. So the 10 have to exist to the very end. So people that try to say that they were completely annihilated, they're in the wrong, and we can verify that by going up here to King Hilderic and clicking on it. Let's go ahead and click it, and we'll go down to the aftermath of well, let's just read here. Hilderic, 460 to 533. Remember, it's 534 that they were overthrown. Was penultimate king of the Vandals and Alans in North Africa in late antiquity, so 523 through 530, although dead by the time the Vandal kingdom was overthrown in 534. In 534 was when it was overthrown. He nevertheless played a key role in the event. Now let's go click on this real quickly. And this is the Vandalic War. And we'll go down here to the aftermath of this war. And you guys can read all that if you want to, but I'm going to read this quote here. And there was booty, this is after the war. First of all, whatever articles are wont to be set apart for the royal service, thrones of gold, and carriages in which it is customary for a king's consort to ride, and much jewelry made of precious stones and golden drinking cups, and all the other things which are useful for the royal table. And there was also silver weighing many thousands of talents, and all the royal treasure amounting to an exceedingly great sum, and among these were the treasures of the Jews, which Titus, the son of Vespasian, together with certain others, had brought to Rome after the capture of Jerusalem. And I showed you in the older videos in Daniel chapter 2 and stuff, where they went in and they annihilated Judah and Jerusalem, and they took the cup, and they took all the temple stuff, and they took it and they acquired it into the Roman Empire. This then was overtaken by the Vandals. They got it back. They got all that equipment back, but during this besiege on down there in North Africa, through Justinian and through his military general, got it all back into the Roman Empire again. So that's what it's saying here. Among these were the treasures of the Jews, which Titus, the son of Vespasian, together with certain others, had brought to Rome after the capture of Jerusalem. There's a missing part that they weren't able to read, and then it says, and there were slaves in the triumph, among whom, okay, if there's slaves, there's people left over. Okay, there's Vandals still alive. And there were slaves in the triumph, among whom was Gillimer himself, wearing some sort of purple garment, right? What I'm not going to get into that, but you go back to the Old Testament and you go back to the Jews, purple garment upon his shoulders, and his family, and as many of the Vandals as were very tall and fair of body. So they're very tall people, they're fair in body. And when Gillimer reached Hippodrome and saw the emperor sitting upon a lofty seat and the people standing in either side, and realized he looked about in what an evil plight he was, He neither wept nor cried, but ceased not, saying over in the words of the Hebrew Scriptures, vanity, vanity, vanity. All is vanity. So you're talking about the book of Ecclesiastes, and these Vandals knew the Hebrew Scriptures. So again, it's more verification of who these 10 tribes, these 10 kingdoms really are. And when he came before the emperor's seat, they stripped off the purple garment and compelled him to fall prone on the ground and to do obeisance to the emperor Justinian. This also Belsarius did, and being a suppliant of the emperor along with him. So and this is from Procopius, the Vandalic War, and again, this is just showing that the Roman Empire through Titus came in, and Vespasian came in and took the Jewish temple stuff. This was overtaken by the Vandals. They had it. They were down in South Africa with all the temple stuff. Then here comes Justinian. He conquers the Vandals, but the Vandals are still alive. Now let's read one more quote here. It says, "Our predecessors did not deserve this favor of God, and they were not only not permitted to liberate Africa, but even saw Rome itself captured by the Vandals, and all the imperial insignia taken from thence to Africa." So you see again that the Vandals took all the treasures of the temple from Rome, and they established their empire down there in South Africa. Now, however, God, in his mercy, has not only delivered Africa and all her provinces into our hands, but the imperial insignia as well, which having been removed at the capture of Rome, he has restored to us. Okay, but one more time, just so we can read this right here. Gelimer was given an ample estate in Galatia. So Gelimer, the Vandal, was given an ample estate in Galatia. So Gelimer is still alive and would have been raised to patrician rank if he had not steadfastly refused to renounce his Arian faith. He was not going to give up his Arian faith for the Catholic Christian Roman Empire's religion. He would not do it. But if he would have, they would have raised him up to the patrician rank, so he would have been elevated. He's very much alive. The Vandal guy is very much alive. Then it says Belsarius was also named Consul Ordinarius for the year 535, allowing him to celebrate a second triumphal procession, being carried through the streets seated on the consular's curule chair, held aloft by Vandal warriors. So the Vandals were not utterly annihilated. And again, none of the 10 can be annihilated, because the 10 have to be alive in the end days when this entire system is brought down. They have to be. They're going to be pagan in nature. They're not really pagan, but in other words, they still will not have come to the truth. They still won't have completely accepted Jesus, but they will exist. And ultimately, they are the ones, as a heathen nation, that will ultimately end up with the territory of Europe once Rome falls. Once Babylon is fallen. When Babylon falls. Alright, let's go ahead and go back to Justinian. So that was the conquest of North Africa. That was the Vandals eliminated, or basically uprooted for the most part. Of course, they're still alive. All of them are still alive. Next came the war in Italy, the first phase. So they go in, they do all this stuff, but eventually Belsarius backs out of it, for a temporary time, and then they had this war with the Sassanid Empire, and then they come back to Italy, war in Italy, second phase. And we'll just read right here in 550 for a large-scale Frankish. Okay, so in other words, you still have one of the other 10 kingdoms. A Frankish invasion was defeated at Casilinium, and Italy was secured for the empire, though it would take Narses is the other one besides Belisarius. He's the other one. I told you I'd bring him up when he comes up. But though it would take Narses several years to reduce the remaining Gothic strongholds, at the end of the war, Italy was garrisoned with an army of 16,000 men. The recovery of Italy cost the empire about 300,000 pounds of gold. Procopius estimated the loss of the Goth at 15 million people. 15 million Ostrogoths. 15 million. Aren't you? You ought to consider yourself to be blessed to not have been alive during these times, guys. You really should. I mean, you're talking about times of mass slaughter. So you had the Vandals in Africa go down in 534. You have the Ostrogoths go down in 552. Now, the Ostrogoths are still alive as well. Again, none of these are completely annihilated. They can't be. They must continue to exist to the end. Then we go down here, other campaigns. It says, in addition to the other conquests, the empire established a presence in Visigoth, Hispania. Okay, so now even the Visigoths are being infiltrated and hit and targeted and destroyed. What you're looking at is you're looking at three different empires that basically got conquered. Now, the Visigoths weren't totally conquered, and when you go to the scriptures, which we're going to go back to here in just a second, it tells us that the little horn, before whom were three of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Okay? And so people have tried to explain this away as these three different empires, or if not the Visigoths, then they tried to the Lombards. They say that the Lombards were annihilated later down the road, and that's true, they are, but that's by the Holy Roman Empire. Nevertheless, what I'm trying to get at is they try to say that these are the three that are plucked up by the root. That's not what the scriptures are saying. That it's not saying that three different ones of these 10 were uprooted and completely eliminated from the face of the earth. Because clearly when we get into the book of Revelation, those 10 are still there. They're still there. Very important that you understand that they're still there. And I will show you what he's saying by that here with this map up here. We'll go take a look at this map. Okay, so if you look here, remember this from here all the way down through here and all the way back up to here and then back up and around here. All of this, in fact, let's just take a look. Okay, so when the 10 came down and they took over and they brought down, when the clay brought down the iron, the Western Empire, this is the territory of that area right here. This is it. Okay? Now, so all you have is this line right here. This line right here over is the Eastern Empire. And this Constantinople is where you got Justinian arising from, this ignoble arising from, that is controlling church and state and tries to conquer back the Roman Empire. Let's take a look at the Western Roman Empire one more time. So the Western Empire was all the way, what we have right now, which is the east, from here over, from this line that I just drew, over to the east was what we still have as the Eastern Empire. What he was trying to do is to get this territory back. Okay, that was his goal. That was his divine duty, basically as the Bishop of Rome, basically as the controller of the religion, the political and religious power of the time, and from Constantinople. He's trying to bring all this back. What he accomplished was he got 1/3 of that empire back. He got all of Italy, all of this area here above Italy, and part of the Visigoths kingdom. He got all of the Vandals. He got all of the islands. He got all that back. He didn't get this 2/3 here. Okay? So he got 1/3 of the kingdom back. Now let's go back to the scriptures. Okay, and he says, so I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another ignoble horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. So let's look up this word first. And we see here that in Chaldee, it is from the roots corresponding to Hebrews 6:9-3, which is first. Okay? So the first horns plucked, 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Now we'll look at the word 3. Hovering over it, we see in Chaldeus corresponding to Hebrews 7:9, 6:9, it means 3 or third. Third. 1/3. When we click on it, and we'll bring it up down here, and we'll hover over, it says this corresponding to Chaldaic Hebrew 7969, and it says the last two forms being masculine, a primitive number 3, occasionally third, or multiplicative thrice, a third. So again, we are talking about a third. He takes down or uproots 1/3 of the 10 kingdoms that came in and took over the Western Roman Empire. Again, he got 1/3 of the Western Roman Empire back. That's exactly and precisely what this ignoble horn accomplished. 1/3 of the 10 kingdom infiltration was uprooted and brought back together into a Christian Roman Empire. So you had pagan Rome. We went through all of its judgments as the seals were unleashed. Then you had the massive earthquake, the political earthquake, in which Constantine the Great arises and begins the process of changing it from pagan Rome to Christian, from the pagan Roman Empire to the Christian Roman Empire. And then you have this little horn arising, this ignoble horn arising, that takes down 1/3 of that which they had acquired and tries to bring it back together into the Iron Kingdom once again. And so the clay has begun to uncleave, and we're dealing exactly with what the book of Daniel was talking about, with the clay and the iron being mixed together, but they will not cleave, and so forth and so on. And so the 1/3 were in fact and unquestionably uprooted and became again a Roman Empire, but this time the Christian Roman Empire. So it was plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, so back over here on Justinian I, now we're going to go down to the religious activities. And we're going to go down here with the religious relations with Rome. And we read right here, it says, previous emperors had tried to alleviate theological conflicts by declarations that de-emphasized the Council of Chalcedon, which had condemned monotheism, which had strongholds in Egypt and Syria, and by tolerating the appointment of monophysites to church offices. The popes reacted by severing ties with the Patriarch of Constantinople, who supported these policies. Where are the popes? Popes are in Rome. Okay? They were in the heart or the capital of the Western Roman Empire. Now, under Justinian, the Western Roman Empire, Rome, is back in position. They're back in play. They got the Ostrogoths out of Italy and reconquered and reestablished Rome. So during the prior to Justinian, the popes reacted by severing ties with the Patriarch of Constantinople, who supported these policies. Emperors Justin I, right, that's the one who adopted Justinian, and later Justinian himself, rescinded these policies and reestablished a union between Constantinople and Rome. After this, Justinian also felt entitled to settle disputes in papal elections, as he did when he favored Vigilus and had his rival Silverius deported. What you are literally seeing here is that Justinian, by his power, removes Silverius, Pope Silverius, who the Ostrogoths had established as Pope according to the Arian faith, and he installs his Pope for the Christian Roman Church, that is Pope Vigilius. Okay, so I brought you over here to the Ostrogothic Papacy on Wiki. And we're going to go right down here to the effects of Justinian's reconquest. And it says here that after Justinian I retook Rome in the Gothic War, which is what we were just reading about. To interfere in the papacy had been one of the first things Justinian had done as soon as his armies got a foothold in Italy. Long before he had completed his victory over the Ostrogoths, Justinian I, Justinian the Great, Saint Justinian, however you want to look at him, had his commander Belisarius depose the pro-Gothic Pope Silverius and install Pope Vigilus, the former papal Apocrisarius, to Constantinople in his place. So by military protection, you see that the papacy has reinstalled itself into Rome, into the Seven Hills, back into Rome, under military protection, under Justinian. He had Justinian remove Pope Silverius and put Pope Vigilus back into place. Now the papacy is finally fully established in Rome. So this ignoble horn was all about what? Jurisprudence, the law, theology, that is the papacy, because he's in the Christian Roman Empire, and the history of Rome. And so we see that it is Justinian that establishes the papacy. And from this point on, the papacy is in power. And we're going to find out that the papacy is the one using the Roman military to do what it wants to get done. Okay, so now I brought you over to the Byzantine Papacy. Now, it says here the Byzantine Papacy was a period of Byzantine domination of the Roman Papacy from 537 to 752, when popes required the approval of Byzantine emperor or episcopal consecration, and many popes were chosen from the Apocrisary, or the inhabitants of Byzantine-ruled Greece, Syria, or Sicily. Justinian I conquered the Italian peninsula in the Gothic War and appointed the next three popes, a practice that would be continued by the successors and later be delegated by the exaggerate of Ravenna. Alright, so if we go down to the origins, the origins here, it says Emperor Justinian forced Pope Silverius to abdicate and installed Pope Vigilus, a former Apocrisarius, to Constantinople in his place. And then Justinian next appointed Pope Pelagius I, holding only a sham election to replace Vigilus. Afterwards, Justinian was content to be limited to the approval of the Pope as Pope John III after his election. Justinian's successors would continue the practice for over a century. So we now see that the papacy has been put into place, and the papacy is now using the Roman military, the Roman Christian Empire military, to do its works. Then we find out that Pope Boniface III issued a decree denouncing bribery in papal elections, so we're dealing with the papacy, and forbidding discussion of candidates for 3 days after the funeral of the previous pope. Thereafter, Boniface III decreed that the clergy and the sons of the church, noble laymen, should meet to elect a successor, each voting according to their conscience. This abated factionalism for the next 4 successions, each resulting in quick elections and imperial approval. But we go down here and we see Boniface III was able to obtain an imperial proclamation declaring what? Declaring Rome as the head of all the churches, reaffirming Justinian first naming the Pope the first among all priests. So now at this point we have complete control of the papacy. So it goes from Justinian into this papacy power. And remember, Justinian is the last Roman. We'll go down to, let's see here, final break. So a lot of time has passed, the papacy's running everything, and you got Leo III responded in 732-33. 732 or 733, by confiscating all papal patrimonies in South Italy and in Sicily, together constituting most papal income at the time. He further removed the bishops of all those locations from papal jurisdiction, instead subjecting them to the Patriarch of Constantinople. Okay, now you're back to that eastern side of the empire. This was in effect an act of triage. It strengthened the imperial grip on the southern empire, but all but guaranteed the eventual destruction of the Exarchate of Ravenna, which finally occurred at Lombard hands in 751. In effect, the papacy had been cast out of the empire. Pope Zachary in 741 was the last pope to announce his election to a Byzantine ruler or seek their approval. Now, subsequent relations within 50 years, Christmas 800, the papacy recognized Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor. And so now you're going to move from the papacy into the Christian Roman Empire, ruled and reigned over by the papacy, into the Holy Roman Empire. So you are at the end of the Christian Roman Empire and the start of the Holy Roman Empire. Christian Roman Empire started under Constantine the First, or Constantine the Great, through the first great political earthquake of the book of Revelation, and started the church state. Under Justinian, the papacy was firmly and utterly put into place. So what you literally have is he comes in and he is educated in jurisprudence, the law, and in theology and in Roman history. So he rewrites the entirety of the law, and he does this one section that's called the novelle. And in that novelle, he declares a seventh-day persecution. Anyone that's going to do seventh-day worship will be persecuted, because we have a specific day of worship. That is, that our day of worship is the first day of the week, Sunday. And now, remember, he is one of the saints. He is Saint Justinian the Great. He is one of the popes of the pope histories, when you go back and you reveal the pope history. So he's the one that established the authority of the church to move the day of Sabbath from the seventh day of the week to the first day of the week. He changed the times and the laws through this novelle and through the rewriting through the Justinian codexes. And he combined religion and civil law together through this entire process, when he completely rewrote the law. He then goes on to conquer Italy and at northern Africa and parts of Spain there, and conquers back 1/3 of the empire, and he brings forth the establishment of the papacy. Then in 538, what did he do? He declared himself no longer chief of the army, but rather now a theologian, and this is how his image is shown on the coin that has the date 12, or XII, as we showed previously in the video. So this is clearly, without question, when you go to Daniel and it says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another ignoble horn, before whom there were 3, or 1/3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man. The eyes of man. Why? Because it was a man. Period. It was a man. So it had the eyes of a man, and it was one man specifically, and a mouth speaking great things. And as he goes forward, and we go, what he is actually doing is bringing forth the roots, the foundation that is going to bring forth the Holy Roman Empire. And either in the book of Revelation, or perhaps maybe in the next video, I'm not sure yet, depends on how I run the next video, but we're going to go over some of the things that the papacy had to say, and what these great things were, these great words that this horn spoke, that this papacy, because that's what he established from Justinian, is the papacy. So from Justinian onward, you're dealing specifically with the papacy that has the Roman military backing it. And so from this point forward, as it continues to morph and to go into the Holy Roman Empire and then into the European Union and so forth and so on, it has the military backing of Rome. It is established in Rome. That is where the Vatican is, on the Seven Hills and so forth and so on. But let's take a look at one more thing before we get this video wrapped up. Alright, we're going to look at one more thing. This is the history of the Christian Church, Volume 3, Nicene and Post-Nicene Christianity, AD 311-600. Okay? And we're just going to drop down to the 80th page of this. And I'll have a link to this if you want to come read all of this. A lot of reading, guys. It took me like almost 4 months to read the whole thing. Alright, so, and this, in point of fact, took place first under Constantine and developed under his successors, particularly under Justinian, into the system of Byzantine imperial papacy, or of the supremacy of the state over the church. Constantine once said to the bishops at a banquet that he also, as a Christian emperor, was a divinely appointed bishop, a bishop over the external affairs of the church, while the internal affairs belonged to the bishops proper. In this pregnant word, he expressed the new posture of the civil sovereign toward the church in a characteristic, though indefinite and equivocal way. He made there a distinction between two divinely authorized episcopates, one secular or imperial, corresponding with the old office of Pontifex Maximus and extending over the whole Roman Empire, therefore ecumenical or universal. The other spiritual or sacerdotal, divided among the different diocesan bishops and appearing properly in its unity and totality only in general council. Accordingly, though not yet even baptized, he acted as the patron and universal temporal bishop of the church, summoned the first ecumenical council for the settlement of the controversy respecting the divinity of Christ, instituted and disposed bishops, and occasionally even delivered sermons to the people. So he was basically the vicar of Christ, or playing that role. But on the other hand, with genuine tact, though this was in his early period, AD 314, kept aloof from the Donatist controversy, and referred to the episcopal tribunal as the highest and last resort in purely spiritual matters. In the exercise of his imperial right of supervision, he did not follow any clear insight and definite theories so much as an instinctive impulse of control, a sense of political religious duty, and the requirements of the time. His word only raised, did not solve, the question of the relation between the imperial and the sacerdotal episcopacy and the extent of their respective jurisdictions in a Christian state. The question became thenceforth the problem, and the strife of history, both sacred and secular, ran through the whole medieval conflict between emperor and pope, between imperial and hierarchical episcopacy, and recurs in modified form in every Protestant establishment church. In general, from this time forth, the prevailing view was that God has divided all power between the priesthood and the kingdom. So sacerdotium et imperium, giving internal or spiritual affairs, especially doctrine and worship, to the former, that is the priesthood, and external or temporal affairs such as government and discipline to the latter, that is the kingdom. And so you have the church and the state interconnected, one and the same, and the pope and the emperor are one and the same. Jumping over here to the history of papal primacy, and then we'll end this video, guys. History of papal primacy, primacy. And you go down here to the bishop of Rome becomes rector of the whole church. So we see that it says that the power of a bishop of Rome increased as the imperial power of the emperor declined. So you have a switching where the emperor really wasn't in any position. He was declining, but the papacy, the pope, the bishop of Rome, was gaining more and more and more power and wielding the military power of the Roman Empire. But the power of the bishop of Rome increased as the imperial power of the emperor declined. Edicts of Emperor Theodosius II and Valentinian III proclaimed the Roman bishop as rector of the whole church. Rector of the whole church. Over here on dictionary.com, we come to rector, and it says it is a noun, a member of the clergy in charge of a parish in the Protestant Episcopal Church. Or 2, a Roman Catholic church. It is an ecclesiastic in charge of a college, religious house, or a congregation. Number 3, in the Anglican church, you have a member of the clergy who has the charge of a parish with full possession of all its rights, tithes, etc. It is number 4, the head of certain universities, colleges, and schools. And so what is it? The charge, or the head of. So coming back to here, it says that these two right here proclaimed the Roman bishop as the head of the whole church. It says here, the Emperor Justinian, that's who we've been talking about, that is the ignoble horn that has arose, that became the papacy power, who was living in the east in Constantinople in the 6th century, published a similar decree. These proclamations did not create the office of the Pope, but from the 6th century onward, the bishop of Rome's power and prestige increased so dramatically that the title of, quote, Pope, end quote, began to fit the bishop of Rome best. So you have the complete takeover of the bishops of Rome as the Pope of Rome, as the head of the church. And so we're going to end it here. But I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another ignoble horn, before whom 1/3 of the first horns were plucked up by their roots. They lost their kingdom. In other words, they lost their territory, and it went back to being part of the Roman Empire, this time as the Christian Roman Empire. And behold, in this horn, okay, that is in Justinian, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. This is when it shifted to the papacy. And what was the papacy doing? They were working on the different creeds and all the different stuff that they did, and you ended up with them declaring themselves to be Pope, number 1, which is what? Father on the earth, which is a blasphemy, a great thing spoken. Also the vicar of Christ, that is the continuation of Christ on the earth, another blasphemy, another great word spoken. And we could go on and on and on about these great speaking words of this ignoble horn that is the papacy, that becomes the papacy. And even as Justinian was doing all these things, it was the papacy that was ultimately controlling it all, and it was the papacy that Justinian was out to set back into Rome. And that's exactly what he accomplished. Now we'll pick it up in the next one with the Ancient of Days reigns. Get in the Word, stay in the Word, and get the Word in you. The most important thing you can possibly do in your life. And remember, other than the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the 2 most important things are love and truth, and after that, peace and justice. See you in the next video.